When Thermaltake told us they were updating their Core P3 Open chassis with a new model called the Core P3 Pro, we initially planned to do a regular review of the new chassis. And then Thermaltake said, but we want to send you an all-in-one liquid cooler, a new power supply, some memory, some fans. We said, well, now we're getting away from the concept of a review, which is that we're testing one component with a bunch of known parts. They said, okay, let's scrap the review, let's go with a featured build using all this good stuff. You're going to hear the name Tough a great many times during this featured build because we have Toughliquid, ToughRAM, Toughpower, and indeed Toughfans with RGB. It would seem the only untough thing we have today is the Core P3 Pro. If you head over to Thermaltake's YouTube channel, you'll find a number of videos about the Core P3 Pro, and they're actually rather good. There's a short introductory video telling you about the features of the case. Another video tells you about the differences between the Core P3 Pro and the original Core P3. Then we have another video with Thermal Mike talking us through the features of the case. And finally a high-end build showing us a full custom loop system. The thing that Thermaltake does not make clear in those videos is that the Core P3 Pro is delivered in kit form, and that means we've got some assembly to do. I've put on a few of the major components, and I have to say the user guide isn't the greatest. Which screw...
Remember, Leo, it's a build, it's not a review.
Anyway, I've muddled through, and we now have these 4 posts in place which support the glass panel that goes there. The 2 lower posts also support the base, which is a change from the original Core P3. I've also added these 2 power supply mounts, although this is incorrect because you put them on the power supply, then put the whole thing in place and attach them. I just put them there just to show what's what. If I was using a mini ITX or micro ATX motherboard, I could put the power supply vertically. This is obviously for a horizontal setup, so if the motherboard stopped there you could rotate the power supply. You'd have plenty of space, in which case you'd substitute this bracket for this, like so. And then you have the question of horizontal graphics or vertical graphics. I'm going to go with horizontal graphics for this build, so this bracket's going to go on. The layout of the Core P3 Pro is familiar from my experience with the Core P3. I reviewed a system from Mesh back in 2017, so 5 and a bit years ago, and the essence is that this motherboard tray also doubles up as a cable management system, and you can add storage in there. You can have your PC stood vertically like that, laid down like so, or if you choose you can mount it on the wall. If you're doing that, you're using the VESA mounting holes in this cover here. That will change how you lay out the cooling, because a significant part of the way this case is meant to function is that the side ventilation with magnetic dust filter means that you can mount a cooler here. Clearly, if you're standing the case upright, as I intend to do, this is the front, you can have air coming in the front and being exhausted through the side, or I suppose you could reverse that, but that would be a bit of a peculiar thing to do. The glass is here, there is no glass on the top, no glass at the front. You also have a perfect view of the front I/O panel, which has been updated. It now includes USB Type-C, just as you'd expect in this day and age. The original chassis only had Type A's, albeit plenty of Type A's. I'm going to finish up installing pieces of hardware such as the PCI Express expansion bracket, see what other bits and pieces are required, and then I think it's time to move on to the power supply and then the motherboard assembly. I've got little doubt that part of the reason Thermaltake ships the Core P3 Pro in flat pack form is to save on shipping costs, and very sensible too. However, a larger part of the reason is because of the choices you have to make as you assemble your case. So are you going to stand it upright? Here we have the base or foot. You're going to put it down flat. You're going to mount it on a wall. This makes a difference. Another choice, for example, is whether you're having a vertical GPU or a horizontal GPU. As I mentioned, I'm going for horizontal, but where I'm going for vertical, I'll be using this bracket and installing an extra piece of hardware. So we can put this to one side. And here we are. And then we move on to the power supply. Toughpower GF3 1200 watt, gold rated, supports the ATX3 standard, so as you would expect, fully modular. You get a bunch of cables, here we are. The main event being this 12 volt high power cable. So if you're in the market for an up to 600 watt RTX 4090 graphics card, and who knows which other graphics cards might support this same cable, no need for nasty adapters, you're all set for action. I need to remove these two brackets I've already installed on the chassis, put them on the power supply, choose my cables, and I can put it all back together again. I'm going to be installing the Toughliquid Ultra 360 AIO in the side position, which means I have no need for this pump mount bracket that would go there were I using a custom loop, and neither do I need these hard drive mounts which can go in these side positions if I want to add storage, and I don't need those positions for fans or for a cooler. So we can push that hardware to one side and we can move on to the motherboard assembly. The motherboard I'm using, an Asus Prime Z790A Wi-Fi processor, a Core i5-13600K, SSD, Kioxia Exceria Pro 2TB, M.2 NVMe, and the memory. Thermaltake ToughRAM XG-RGB, bit of a mouthful, DDR5 6000. And yes, part of the reason I chose the Asus Prime Z790A Wi-Fi motherboard for this build is that the black and white colour combination works very nicely with the Thermaltake case. I'm going to be installing the Toughliquid Ultra S360 cooler in the side position, and I'm swapping out the stock fans for these rather posher ToughFans with RGB. Also going to add some ToughFans in the front, which means I need to install this front bracket. What I'm not certain of is whether it's best to put the cooler in the side first and then put the bracket in place and then put the fans in, or if I should put the fans in this bracket and put it in as an assembly. I think I'm going to install this in the front, then put the cooler in place and then add the fans. And if I'm wrong, I'll retrace my steps. And with the three hidden away screws tightened up, I say hidden, they're in there, the front now feels fairly solid. So the liquid cooler. Three fans I shan't be using, pack of fixtures and fittings. The side cooling location can accommodate a 360 or a 420, so this shouldn't pose any problems. The fans supplied with the Toughliquid Ultra S360 are rated up to 2,500 RPM or PWM units, have no RGB, so a simple 4-pin connector. The fans I'm installing, the ToughFan 12 RGBs, are rated up to 2,000 RPM and they have a connector that looks somewhat like a USB to motherboard connection, and they are controlled by this hub which can somewhat bizarrely control up to 5 fans. I'm going to install 6 in total, so I'm going to need to have 3 on the one controller and the front 3 on a separate controller, and these have RGB. I've seen Thermaltake's videos, they look very pretty. I have not yet tried them myself, looking forward to that. The radiator and fan assembly is ready to go, and I have the pump mounting hardware installed on the CPU socket, so it's time to get it all in place. Splodge of thermal compound. And tighten down the pump block. The next job is a spot of cable management, and then we can install our Gigabyte Radeon RX 6950 XT graphics card. To my eyes, the Gigabyte RX 6950 XT graphics card is beautifully horizontal. If it wasn't, if it had any sag, I could use this bracket which can be moved around, so it goes in that position, there's a whole series of holes and I can move it up and down, and it would then alleviate the sag. But Gigabyte has done a fine job, and it's a relatively light, mighty graphics card, so no need for the bracket. My final job is to install 3 more of the ToughFan 12 RGB fans at the front of the case, hook them up around the back, and then we should be ready to start up the PC. And would you look at that? It's a feast of rotating rainbow marquee. The RGB lighting is configured within Thermaltake's TT RGB Plus software. We're looking at the RGB in both the ToughRAM XG-RGB D5 and also the ToughFan 12 RGBs. And the fans, as you can see, we have RGB in the periphery fore and aft, but also coming through the edge of the fans. Overall, the PC looks very neat and tidy, but of course it is a gaming PC. The new Core i5 in combination with the Gigabyte RX 6950 XT, that packs some punch. Here we are playing through the Far Cry 6 canned benchmark, and it absolutely flies along at 1440p with high IQ settings. No trouble whatsoever, but of course we'd expect nothing less from that combination of hardware. And there we have it. My showcase build in a Thermaltake Core P3 Pro is complete.